Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. Welcome. I love seeing you all popping onto the screen. I get to check it out. Who's all here? Oh, so good to see you all. All right. How is everyone? I decided to wear my cute sparkly sweater. It feels very festive. So pretty. Oh, so good to see you all. Okay, happy December 3rd. Who is getting so excited for Christmas? This is your first COVID Christmas. Isn't that exciting? So much fun. We've never had a COVID Christmas before. It's like, let's bring it, right? I just noticed that Susan's on here, and Susan is doing like such a smart and amazing thing. Her whole family is going to be quarantining so that they can all be together for Christmas. I think that's amazing. I love that. Like they're all just gonna do 2 weeks beforehand so that they can all be together. I think that's like such good humans to do that, and that's such dedication. So love it. All right. 'Tis the season to be jolly. So how to enjoy the holidays without all the stress. So in the Q&A, I would love to hear how people are feeling right now. So there are a lot of different emotions going on about about the holidays. And there's a lot of what there's restrictions, travel, like all of that. I really want to hear from you what's going on in your mind. And I know you all had Thanksgiving. So, what were the challenges from Thanksgiving? What were things that were difficult? What things were easy? What things surprised you? I totally want to hear it. Because one of the things that happens is we know our brains are wired, our lower brain, we're wired for staying safe, seeking pleasure, and creating, conserving energy. And so when we have to do something different, our brains can kind of freak out. So I posted it in the reminder email, but I'm teaching my 16-year-old daughter how to drive. Have any of you had the pleasure, saying pleasure, little sarcastically, of teaching a child to drive? It's an experience, I tell you. And so, because the thing that's so interesting about watching her drive is like everything is very awkward. Like the way she has her hands is really awkward. The way she turns is really awkward. And the funny thing about it is that I don't even really know how to explain it in a way because it's just so automatic for me to move my hands the way I do. Like I'm like hand over hand, hand over hand. And she's like, I don't even know what that means, mom. And I'm like, yeah, I don't really either. So it's really interesting because now when I'm driving, I actually am paying attention to how I drive because I've just kind of taken that for granted. So interesting. So it's the same thing with us right now. We are needing more energy to accomplish certain things than we had before because even like going to the grocery store, which is like a superhuman experience, like I'm sorry, it's a super like routine experience. Like if I said to any of you, can you go to the store and get milk? You're like, oh yeah, I totally know how to do that. But even routine things have changed. Like going to the grocery store is different. And there's like a whole new layer of, do we actually go to the grocery store? Should we go online? Are there going to be like really long lineups? Like all of that. So now those things that we thought were really easy, like me, I take for granted driving, but it's not because of all the restrictions. Okay, excited to be enjoying the holiday with my 3-year-old son. Also stressed about finances and getting everything done. Thanksgiving was unexpected challenge. I was more aware of my feelings, but had a hard time adjusting. Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad you brought this up, Ashley. Thank you. So this is really so kind of going along those lines. So things that we as humans, and right, we want to stay safe, we want to seek pleasure, and we want to conserve energy. So what's happening to us is things that used to just be like totally normal are now we're needing a lot more energy to accomplish it because we have so many different considerations that we never considered before. So that's one thing. And now the next thing is, so now that you have this new awareness, because we understand now, like, oh, this is just how we're wired. We have this lower brain, and then we have a higher brain. And we have these new tools, like life is actually supposed to be 50% good and 50% bad. And we know about emotional adulthood, like nobody can make us feel any way. Like people can say words and then I just choose my thoughts about their words. So I'm and the model, right? Like, oh, we have a difference between a circumstance and a thought. Like COVID is just neutral, and then I just get to decide what I think about it. So what's happening is we have all these new ways of thinking. We have these new ways of being aware, but so now we have this like heightened sense, and it's almost like you had color blindness, and when I teach you these tools, it's like you can actually see in color. And because you can see in color now, there's like so much stimulation. There's so much more going on than you've ever experienced because you just didn't know before. So, like what the comment here was for it, this comment here is that because she's so much more aware of her feelings, then it's like, oh my gosh. So I know that like mother can say words. And so I actually get to decide what I want to think about the words that she said. Rather than I'm like before we had these new tools, it was like mother saying words meant I automatically went into defense mode or victim mentality or whatever that was. And but because like my daughter who's learning to drive, kind of like, where do I put my hands? And oh, I have to signal. So I have to do multiple things. Like I have to be putting my foot on the gas. I have to be checking. I have to be signaling. It's kind of cumbersome and it's not really natural. Okay. So anything else that has come up for you, um, even in the thought of um, we had this holiday that you just always kind of took that for granted, like that's just what we do. What's coming up for you in that? Those things have changed, like those routines, those kinds of have changed. So I want you to think about that while I go into these questions. Okay, so the webinar topic for today is "'Tis the Season to Be Jolly: How to Enjoy the Holidays Without the Stress." So I'm going to teach you a little bit about stress, and I'm going to teach you a little bit about how it affects us, and then we're going to go into the workshop, and I'm going to give you some really practical ways of how to be aware of what's actually going on in our bodies and having like the results that we want in our life. So are you ready? So please make sure that you ask any questions in the Q&A. And I love that you're putting it in the Q&A because I can't have the chat and the Q&A open at the same time. So I love that you're here. I'm so happy to see all of you. So when we think about stress, something that's super interesting that I don't know how much we actually are aware of this is how much our thoughts are actually connected to our body. So let me explain that. So, for example, we can have a thought like, "Oh, I don't know if they're going to like that present, or I'm not sure if I should go to the grocery store. It doesn't seem safe." So we can have a thought, and immediately with that thought, what happens? Our body releases cortisol and adrenaline when we are stressed. So why does our body do that? Like, we're just having a thought, and it does that because it's stress is our body's way of responding to any kind of demand or threat. So when we sense danger, whether real or imagined, the body's defenses kick into gear in a rapid automatic process known as fight or flight reaction. So when you think about this body, this fight or flight, remember we have like fight, flight, or freeze. That's like our instincts, that's our primal like wiring. That still holds true even in 2020. And as we've seen with COVID, when there actually was a real threat, which by the way, is just increasing more and more. So, like I was talking to Jeannie this morning, she was telling me about the capacity that hospitals are at where she lives, and just like it is an actual real threat. This is probably the first time that we have been in this kind of situation where we actually have that. Um, okay, I'll address that, Cheryl. So our body, we have a thought that causes us stress. And our body's like, oh, I'm wired for this. I know what to do. So I'm going to release some cortisol, and then I'm going to release adrenaline. Because if you're stressed, you're going to need a whole bunch of energy to run or escape, right? So fight, you're going to need some strength to fight. Flight, you need some strength to run. Or freeze, you're going to need to have that stamina to just like stay still. So that is actually what happens. So stress response is a way to protect us. So it helps us stay focused, it gives us energy, and it keeps us really at high alert. So in that way, our heart, what's the physical reaction? So our heart can pound faster, our muscles can tighten, our blood pressure rises, our breath quickens, our senses become sharper. Because we're going to need to be able, like we have to be really agile, right? We have to be able to do that. Now, one of the things that I often tell my clients is when emotions are high, intelligence is low. And it's the same thing with when we're super stressed, we actually don't have as much brain capacity because all the energy is going towards the adrenaline, because we need to be like on alert. We need to be ready to run or fight or whatever it is. Okay, so when I'm explaining this, I want to hear your feedback on, have you ever thought about how powerful our thoughts are before? Because we can just have a thought, like, I don't know if he's going to like this present, or I'm not sure if my kids are going to come home for Christmas, or I'm not sure if one of my family members are going to be sick. So like that's just a thought, but it literally causes like a massive reaction. So one of the comments here is, because my eating schedule has changed, visiting others is a little difficult. Had to adjust my eating schedule. Okay. So when we have that thought, it's like, my eating schedule has changed. What is the feeling that comes from that? Awkwardness, discomfort, or it's kind of like, I'm visiting with people, they eat when they eat. Because really, when we sit down for dinner, does it mean we all, I have a yawn. Excuse me. When we sit down for dinner, does that mean everyone has to eat at the same time? So let me ask you this question. If your doctor said to you, you know what, you're not allowed to eat for a week, we're going to do these tests and we're not sure what's going on. And you just can't eat any food for a whole week. We're going to give you this thing, you have to drink it, and that's all. So if you knew for your health that like you shouldn't eat at all or anything, then what would happen at dinner time? So this is just how we start thinking about things in a different way. Because it's like, what is the purpose of eating? What is the purpose of all of that? But it can cause us stress and it can cause us some anxiety because it's like, I always have eaten with my family. Yeah, I wouldn't eat it, right? But because when I think about eating with family and like the schedule, what's the whole purpose of the food? What's the whole purpose of sitting down for a meal? Is it to actually eat the food or is it to connect with the family? And that's such a good question. And in fact, with my one-on-one clients on Monday morning, we're actually going to eat together. I'm going to walk them through eating. It's going to be really interesting because there's we haven't thought about the way we think about food and about the way that we approach food and mealtime and all of that. Even this idea of like a Thanksgiving dinner. Like one of my clients in the group, she was coaching. Oh, what's the what, Susan? Because so some of you, so most religions, I think actually all religions, there's one form or another of fasting. And so in my religion, the first Sunday of every month, the adults and the children that decide, or the youth, I encourage my kids to fast. And what we do is we take the money that we would spend on food and we donate it to the poor. And the purpose is like when you're not being in your physical body and you're feeding your physical body, you focus more on spiritual things. So this has been a bit of a challenge for me because I have 5 children to feed. And so this is a different perspective. Okay. So I'm still cooking for my family. I'm still making pancakes and I'm still making French toast, and because that's the kind of mom I want to be. And I'm still making a meal for them for breakfast and for lunch because like that's just who I choose to be. And I don't eat any of it. And I don't make a big deal of it because I say to myself, this is just what I want to do. So, you're asking about Monday. Yes, I'm walking you through eating, Susan. Remember? I talked about this. So if you want to bring porridge or something, and actually some people Jeannie's just going to bring a hard-boiled egg. You don't have to it doesn't have to be a big deal. But yeah, that's what we're doing. It's going to be so awesome. Okay, so let's go back to the stress because the topic is 'tis the season to be jolly, how to enjoy the holidays without all the stress. So in the Q&A, what are all the things that are stressful about the holidays? Tell me, what's super stressful? Let's get a list together. All right, you gotta help me here. I'm not gonna write the whole list by myself. Let's go through it. What is super stressful about the holidays? Come on, write them down, ladies. I know you know them. Here we go. Okay, super stressful. So the circumstance is holidays. Holiday season, Christmas. Okay, and I'm actually going to make it more specific. I'm going to say December. I'm just going to say the month of December. Okay, because that way I know that that's what I'm talking about. All right, so then we have a bunch of thoughts and then we have a feeling. So things that are stressful, we've got decorating, going to put the list over here. Decorating, buying gifts. So we have the buying of the gifts. We have the wrapping of the gifts. Okay. Cooking larger meals. Okay, so food. So we've got the cooking and we have the amount. Oh, finances. Yeah. Overspending. Yeah, yesterday was really interesting. I'm doing my podcast, as you know, so I went and bought a microphone and went to Best Buy. Oh my goodness. It's like all the shiny objects, new TVs and all the fancy things. Okay, so then like family, maybe no family. Okay, you guys are doing a great job. Scheduling family events. Oh, there we go. Schedules. We don't want to hurt people's feelings. Deciding what to give. Yeah, that's part of that. Buying. Making presents. Yeah, I have this manual that in order to be a good mom, you had to make all homemade presents for your kids. Missing family. So we have the family, no family, but we also have the missing families who are deceased. Yes. So like missing them and then not being able to even like FaceTime or anything. Concerned about my mom with my dad gone. Yes. So like the well-being of family members. Right? Totally. So these are, we also have time. Do we have that down? Time constraints. Like, are we going to get everything done? What about this idea of, am I doing it okay? Like, am I doing it right? Like, one of my stresses is like, am I providing my kids with the best experience? So what would that stress be? Like, am I doing it right? How would I say that? Oh, cleaning. Yes. Okay. I grew up where my mom, we like deep cleaned for Christmas. Like we shine silver. My mom was like, she always said, if Jesus would come to our house, would we be happy? So cleaning. Also, let me think, like, how would I say that? With like, it's not like fear of missing out, but it's like, yeah, that's one of my stresses is providing my kids with the best experience. How would I say that? Someone help me out. Memories, tradition. Thank you. Memories, traditions. There's a lot of pressure we put on ourselves, right? To like having it just so. I like that. Thank you, Ashley, for helping me with that one. So these are all very stressful. So when we think about it, so, buying the gifts, wrapping gifts, food, cooking. And then, guess what we haven't put down yet? Weight gain, right? I used to worry so much about weight gain. You know what else was a huge stress for me? I'm going to tell you. There's only certain people we saw at Christmas time, and I was really stressed about them judging me. Like I bought a girdle. I'd never bought a girdle before, but like, like one of those like kind of like Spanx kind of things. I bought that on December 23rd because I was so worried people judging me about my weight. It was a real thing for me. Getting Christmas cards done. Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, are we going to do Christmas cards? Getting them done. Okay. So these are all very stressful. So let's talk about what's really stressful about this. So let's just take this, for example, decorating. What's really stressful about decorating? Like if we were to really look at that, What is stressful about it? Like that it's not done on time, that it's not nice enough, that people won't like it. Like, let's get really specific about what is stressful about decorating. Dragging it out and having to put it all away. Oh, so it's just like a lot of work. So what's stressful about that? Because I actually really enjoy like getting everything out. But what could be very stressful? So dragging it out, having to put it back. What else could be stressful about like let's just take this very specifically of decorating. Want to do it right. It's done on time. That everyone will be impressed. Right. Okay. This is giving us good information. All right. So buying gifts. What is stressful about buying gifts? Wanting everything to look a certain way. Interesting. Because so when we think about all of these, we want it to look a certain way. We want someone to like it. We want to have everything wrapped and organized so that it can be the special way, right? Because it's want to get things the person will like, not okay. We want to like honor our budget. We want to like not be really mean to our future self who's gonna have to pay that Visa bill or whatever. Make sure to even it out with all the kids. Oh my goodness, I have such a problem with that one, Marlene, because I have 5 kids. And so when you look at all of these, what do you think is the underlying feeling that we ultimately want to have with the holidays? So we're thinking about not overspending. We want to have everything right. We want to feel, what do we really just want to feel in the holidays? Enjoyment, contentment, right? So let's just put this in the feeling line. I'll just put enjoyment. Okay. So now, when we think about decorating, if we put decorating in the circumstance line, we would have to make it neutral, right? So love and appreciation, joy, takes a time commitment to get all these things done, right? So when we think about decorating, if we were to make it neutral, it's like 3 bins of holiday decor displayed in the house. That's how we would describe it, right? So that's the circumstance. So what is our main thought about Christmas decorations that would help us when we feel enjoyment? Who can give me a thought about it? What's a thought about Christmas decorations that would create the feeling of enjoyment? I'm making you do work today. So, okay, I'm going to bring these out. This is enjoyment. I'm looking at life with enjoyment. So when I think about Christmas decorations, enjoyment, I think I love getting the house all festive. Decorations make the house look so nice. I want to decorate my house so I can enjoy it. Perfect. So when we have those thoughts, let's decorate. Oh, I don't decorate anymore. That's okay, Nancy. So when you have that thought, decorations make the house look so nice, and then you feel enjoyment, then instead of what you said earlier was, where did you say it? Dragging it all out and having to put it all away. We're not dragging anything out. We're like, Mine are all under the stairs. So I'm like creepy. And I have to go in there and not bang my head, which I do like 3 or 4 times because I'm like really tall. And I just like, oh, you guys, look at this. We're going to do this because I have so much enjoyment of it. But don't get me wrong. There was always the 50-50. So when the 50% of like something got broken or I banged my head, guess what happens to me? I don't make a big deal of it because I'm like, oh, that was just the 50% that wasn't so super awesome. No big deal, right? Just banged my head. That's just the price you have to pay to have enjoyment of the Christmas decorations. Okay. So this is part of us making a decision about the kind of life that we want to have. So when we can put these stresses, so let's go to finances, because finances are a really big deal. What do you think is the best? So if anyone wants to get coached, please put your hand up. I'm very happy to coach any of you on this. So on the bottom of your screen, you have a little hand and I can put you on the screen. You always have to pack a lot of things away to make space. Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, oh, that's just what happens. I just do that. Okay. So, let's go to the worksheet. So we have on the worksheet, because you know me, I love a worksheet. What stresses do you feel the holidays? Okay, you did a really good job here. And I really like what we've come up with. And then, what physical reaction does your body have when you're stressed? So I talked about we have a thought, like, I hope they enjoy everything. I hope I get everything done in time. And then our body literally, like, it's amazing. Our thoughts release cortisol. It releases adrenaline. Like, our bodies and our minds are so connected. It's incredible. So when you feel that extra stress, our heart, like I said, our heart pounds faster, our muscles tighten, our blood pressure can rise, our breath quickens, our senses become sharper. Like, that is a physical reaction to our thought. And literally, it's just a thought, right? So again, in here in the model, it's like the circumstance is wrapping presents. The circumstance is spending money. The circumstance is a Christmas budget. The circumstance is cooking for 40 people. The circumstance is scheduling family, scheduling families' times together. Like, these are all just circumstances. They are all neutral. And then we have the power to decide what we want to think about it. And what I'm really encouraging you to do is decide beforehand how you want to feel about it before you have a thought. So when you're in that feeling of joy and the feeling of contentment and the feeling of all those things, then the thoughts will come. Because we know that if you have chronic stress, we have depression and anxiety, pain of any kind, sleep problems, autoimmune, digestive, skin conditions, heart disease, weight problems, memory issues. Some of my clients have fibromyalgia. Like, those kinds of things contribute. Because if we're constantly having that stress over and over, we're not able to be at our best self, because we literally are having all these hormones that are being released, like cortisol and like adrenaline going through us, and that doesn't help us to really be working from our higher brain. Because if we're in that fight, flight, or freeze all the time, we're not being served well. Okay, so one of the things I want to teach you today about stress is this concept of there's fear of things. Because when you look at this list, right, decorating, fear of someone judging you, buying gifts, fear or of rejection, or they're not going to like it, and so that you might be rejected in some way. Wrapping presents, there's like a worry that or stress that you're not going to get it finished in time, right? So there's a fear there that you won't have that finished in time. Food and cooking, what is the problem there? It's like, well, do you have a fear that you aren't able to finish it all, that you're not capable of it, that it's going to put too much pressure on you, that you might not be able um, to do everything, or maybe it's like you're so worried that you're going to be so exhausted, you doubt your capabilities, whatever that is. Overspending. What's the problem with overspending? There's a fear of not having enough, and then having all the regret of what happens when you have to pay credit card debt, or that you disappoint yourself because you said, I'm only going to spend so much, and then you went over. Like, what is actually the feeling that you have? So many of these stresses we have a lot of fear associated with that. Now, there's nothing wrong with fear. And in fact, fear is a wonderful friend. So in some ways, it's good to have some fear, because otherwise we would do crazy overspending, and then we wouldn't be responsible adults, and we would be like really, really big, because we'd be eating all the time. And so we wouldn't be healthy. We wouldn't be, healthy and strong. And that doesn't feel good. So there is a certain level of fear that is actually very helpful. And I love to give the example of, like, if some weirdo is following you in the street, it's like, yeah, we get this dopamine hit of like, better run. Then we are like, heightened senses and we'll be safe. So there is also an issue of, what will people think if I spend more? Then I must be very successful. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so I think there's this idea of judgment, and that kind of came down to, for me, at the Christmas party. It's like, I worried about judgment, because then I wouldn't be acceptable, and I had a fear of being like being judged and being like less than, and people wouldn't like me, and there's like this unacceptability. And that's kind of the same thing with that comment, is if I spend more, then I must be very successful. So it's the same thing of like people judging you, people like, you worry more about what other people think of you than what you think of yourself. And how does that feel? Right? So when we look at fear, there's nothing wrong with having some fear, and fear can be really healthy. So even that thought, like, if I spend more, then I must be very successful. So there's a fear that people might not think you're as successful as you would be. And so that fear is like, that you wouldn't be acceptable, that you could be rejected. Now, let's think back about our wiring. Our wiring is that we, like, before we had houses and we had like food on a regular basis, we would live together. So think about my ancestors came across from like Norway and England, and they came across the prairies and came to the West, and they were in wagon trains and hand carts. That's how they came. And so every night they would be in the circle and be safe, and they'd all be secure. But if they were rejected somehow, if they were on their own, they would be the first ones to be killed, right? Totally. And so there is something about our wiring that we don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be an outcast, because it literally meant that we were like the first one to be killed. Like, we were prey. So we are wired for that. But now we live in 2020, right? We have houses, we have security. There's like, we have the internet. People can say all sorts of things. But we now know that feelings are just vibrations in our body. They just let us know, they send us messages about safety or not. So in that comment about, people judging us about our weight, because people have a problem with our weight, that's their problem. What does that got to, like, just because you weigh a certain amount has zero impact on your worth. Just because you have 20 more pounds of gravity than somebody else, does that make any difference of their worth? No, of course not. But because we have advertising and marketing, there's these messages out there saying like, you know, you are better if you weigh less. And it's interesting to me because I remember my sister, she lost a lot of weight at a time, and she came to a family gathering and everyone gave her so much attention. And I remember just thinking, oh, I want people to do that for me. I want that. And so every time I went to my dad's, I would do this mental check. I was like, oh, am I acceptable? How much did I weigh last time I went there? We only went to my dad's like once or twice a year, and we saw different people there. I'm like, and I had this really lingering thought, like, I need to be acceptable. I need to get that attention. I need to look a certain way to get that kind of response. Yeah, it was so interesting in my brain. And truthfully, like, they couldn't care less what I looked like, because they didn't care. But I made it mean so much about me. So it's the same thing. It could be with money. The same thing. It could be with how your house is decorated. It could be how your food tastes. All those things. That's fear of rejection. So fear is fine. I really want to emphasize that. But then what happens is it can morph into worry. So you don't have to put your hand up, but how many of you associate with being a bit of a worrywart? Okay. So worry is basically saying, don't forget there could be problems. Don't forget that someone could reject you, or someone could think that you're not good enough. And then if worry sticks around enough, then guess what happens? That morphs into anxiety. And what anxiety is when you stay in your worst case scenario. So worst case scenario would be that you spent all your money and that you can't pay your bills, and then you get kicked out of your house because you spent too much money at Christmas. So you see where you go from fear of like, I'm not sure if I'm going to overspend, to worry like, oh, you better be careful. You better, there are people that overspend and it's really awful. And you got to be really careful about those things. And don't forget that should be a problem for you, to go to your worst case scenario. And then you stay there. It's like, oh, we've overspent so much that now we don't even have a house over our head. Okay. So that is really, really important to get into your mind. Now, this is the beautiful thing, is that we can take fear and then worry and then anxiety, but because we know how we got there, we know how we can get out of there. So when you have those physical symptoms of worry, like when your heart starts kind of beating, and you have that physical reaction, like you may be a little sweaty, your hands are kind of clammy, and you're feeling like your stomach is really getting like all knotted and uncomfortable, because you keep thinking over and over again, like, don't forget to worry, don't forget to worry, don't forget there could be problems. That turning turns into worst case scenario, and then staying there. But you're like, oh, I know how I got to that road. I know how to get back. Isn't that beautiful? It's wonderful. So that's what we just need to understand. Okay. So going back to the worksheets, what do you love about the holidays? So let's go back to like, what is the whole reason I love the holidays in the first place? Why is it so wonderful? Why is it magical? Why is it something that I just look forward to every year? What would you like to start doing on the holidays? So what are things that you really enjoy doing and that you want to implement? So pick one thing from your start or stop list that you want to commit to this month. Oh, whoops. Where am I? Oh, I think I got my thing out of order. Well, that's interesting. Okay. I did. I got out of order. Okay. Knowing is half the battle. Awareness of our stress is key. However, we have had a lot of practice hiding, running away from, or ignoring the stresses in our lives. So list some of the ways you do this. So what ways do you run away from your stress? Overspending, overeating, Facebooking, a lot of us. Overconsuming. So buffering, we talk about buffering in two ways. that's using an external factor to make us feel differently inside. And we buffer to eliminate urges. And the goal is to allow the urges and not make a big deal of it. So like yesterday when I was at Best Buy and there was like these fancy TVs and they're only on sale till today. And they're such a good deal and all that. Like I have an urge to buy that TV, but like I don't really need it. So I'm like, oh yeah, I have that urge, but it doesn't mean that I have to like do it. So I want you to think about that in your list of stresses, what's happening for you. So I want you to pay attention to your buffers. Isn't that fun? You're like, oh, Dara asked me to do the funnest things ever. So what I've done on this worksheet is I want you to just collect data of the urges. So for example, if you have like a grandson, and let's just say all of us, right? Like we're going to make a budget. We're like, this is how much we're going to spend at Christmas. And we're going to budget our money. We're going to budget our time, and we're going to budget even our social media time, because we want to just make sure that we have like time for rest and be calm and all of that. But you're online and you see this thing and it's so cute and you just know that grandson would just love that thing, but you're like, oh, it's not in my budget. That's an urge. That's called an urge. Okay. Because if you respond to that, are you going to have enjoyment? Is that really going to give you enjoyment? Is that really going to give you peace? No, because you're not honoring yourself. You're not trusting yourself. You're not doing that for yourself. So I want you to just start collecting those on there. So some of you have done my urge jar. This is very similar, but you just pay attention. You're like, oh, that's what's happening. Okay. So that's what I want you to do there. Oh, and then there's the working your goal backwards. And that's what I did share that already. So this is the feeling you want to feel: enjoyment, peace, calm. And so in order to do that, I want to believe I can believe this and not change a thing. So even going back to Cheryl, she went to visit, she was talking about going to see her mom, and they had different dinner times. So it's like, I want to believe that I can just be at someone's house and enjoy the food, like sitting and eating dinner, even if it's not in my eating window. I just want to believe that. And so you get to just decide that you can just do that. Isn't that awesome? So good. Okay. And then the next part of that is I can believe this and not change a thing. So, do you like my little Christmas decorations? So much fun. So you can actually just decide to believe that. So let's take, for example, if I spend more, then I must be very successful. So you can believe people who spend a lot of money at Christmas doesn't change about how successful they are or not. Because we can have people that make $10 million and they could just decide that they spend X amount of dollars. And in fact, we don't even know what they're doing. Like maybe they're donating, like they bought like a whole village, 40 goats, but we don't even know what they spent because they don't want anyone to know about it. And we can have other people that have like $10,000 in credit card debt, and they could spend all sorts of money, but are they successful? Well, it depends on what you think about $10,000 of credit card debt, right? Because even that successful is just it's just a thought. Like, how do we even know what successful is or not? Because like, what's the criteria? So now we have the questions about what stresses do you feel in the holidays. So this is what I want you to do this week. I want you to really start paying attention to your urges. And basically all an urge is that you want something, you have a desire for something, and then you're like, So write down in the chat, what do you have an urge for right now? in this moment? Or what's an urge that you want at Christmas time? A nap. What else do you want? Put it in the Q&A. Chocolate, chips, right? Okay, so tell me why you want to have those. Why do you want to have a nap? Why do you want to have chocolate? Why do you want chips? Hot chocolate. Oh, by the way, I made a healthy hot chocolate today. I'll quickly tell you. So you can get, I put herbal tea, and then I put a tablespoon, maybe not even. Yeah, maybe a tablespoon of cocoa. And then I put like 2 tablespoons of ghee. And then I put some ginger. And then I put some other powders, like they're just like healthy powders, Shazantra or something like that. Anyways, and then I put it in my blender and I mixed it up, and it's delicious. So good. I love it. Why do you want to have those? Pleasure from flavor and crunch. Okay, so you want to have pleasure. But in the end, after you've eaten the chips, how do you feel? Do you feel does your stomach feel a little bit upset? You feel a little bit, right? Where could you get pleasure from? So this is where you just start asking yourself, and chocolate. So if you want chocolate, I mean, and we could get chocolate, but most likely you want the chocolate to feel a certain way. So this is where these worksheets are going to help you. Like, I want to feel and I want to believe. I can believe this and not change a thing. Like, you can just decide, yeah, inner peace, right? So, so what would you like to start doing in the holidays? So I'll give you an example. I love reading to my kids, and they're bigger now, but I have 24 bags, fabric bags. I made these like 10, 15 years ago, and I've collected Christmas books. And I just put the Christmas books in them, and every night we read, because I want to connect with my kids. I want to feel like love and connection. I want to cuddle with them, and I just want to have that feeling of calm and peace. And so I just make that happen. So I just created a tradition, and I just like prioritize and make it happen. And some days we miss, and that's okay. We just have more time the next day, and I don't beat myself up. So I would like to have one day that I don't feel regret or guilt. Okay. So how do you do that? How can you decide I'm not going to feel regret and I'm not going to feel guilt? So one of the things that I want to offer to you is there will be times where you have, oh, this is the time where I feel some regret, and this is the time where I feel guilt, but I don't make it mean that I'm dumb and I'm bad and I'm terrible. That's the difference. It's like we can't control how we feel necessarily, because, right, we have thoughts. We have 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day. And some of them we decide to believe those thoughts, and some of them are like noted and we reject them. So if we have a thought that's like, oh, you shouldn't have bought that, and if you believe that thought, then of course you're going to feel regret or maybe some guilt. And then you're like, oh, so when I have that thought, then I feel guilt and regret. Or you could have the thought like, the thought comes of, you probably shouldn't have bought that thing. And then you could respond and say, yeah, I probably shouldn't have, but in the moment, that's what I decided to do. And that's just the way it is. So then we could even change that into, you could let yourself feel some regret, and then it can go into acceptance. Do you have any other questions about that? Okay, it's hard for me to see the chat. How do you decide or have the process to change the thought? Right. Okay. So if you have that thought that comes, like you probably shouldn't have bought that gift, then you're like, you take that thought and you say, okay, how does that make me feel? And then you get to decide. And if initially maybe it's regret, and you're like, okay, here's regret. This is me. It's kind of like in those movies where like a ghost will come into a person, and they're like, oh, and they just feel all like weird because it's in them. That's kind of how a feeling is. And allowing a feeling to be in you, it's kind of like that, where it's like, oh my gosh, here's this feeling. It's coming in me. It's like Ghostbusters or something, right? So then you're just like, okay, here it is. I'm feeling some regret. But even that, it's like you get to decide. Because, okay, so now I feel some regret. What do I want to do about it now? Like you're always the driver of your own life. But when you can just allow regret to be in you, you don't have to judge it or push it away. So this kind of brings us to my analogy of the beach ball. So many people try to avoid or resist emotions. But if you imagine a big beach ball and you don't want to feel it, so you're trying to avoid it or resist it, you're pushing it under. And so you're spending so much energy trying to push it away that you're not able to like learn from that or just to accept it. Whereas if you just accept it, you're like, oh, that's regret. I hear you. I see you. Now what do I want to do? Because you can decide that for yourself. All right. No one wanted to get coached and time is almost up. Oh my goodness, so much. Okay, so in the Q&A, I want you to tell me one thing you're going to do different this week because you came to this webinar. One thing you do, because if you change one behavior every week, even for 52 weeks, that's 52 new things you're doing about yourself. 52. So in the Q&A, I want you to think about what you've learned about stress, that our thoughts, we have a thought and then we have a hormone reaction. We have a physical and hormonal reaction just with our thoughts. And who's in charge of our thoughts? Remember, the thoughts come and then we get to decide if we're going to believe that thought or if we're going to reject that thought. So I'm going to think about and decide which things are most important for me to get done and not worry about the rest. Okay, so this reminds me of this concept of a triage. So have you ever gone to like a hospital, like emergency, and they do a triage, right? And they say, this is more severe, this is less severe, you can wait a little bit longer, right? Journal, work your goal backwards. Playing some Christmas music, it will bring you joy, right? Because you decide that it's going to bring you joy. So even like I gave that example we were doing these really cute Christmas presents. I'm like painting with my kids and it's so cute. And I had Christmas music. They were even singing. It was so lovely. And then we had some negative and some different negative things went on. And I was like, oh, that's just the 50% that's not so great. But I didn't make a big deal of it. I didn't say, oh, I'm the worst mom ever. And like, how did I spoil all this? I'm like, oh no, there was supposed to be some 50%. There was supposed to be the husband that wasn't too happy about whatever, right? It's like, oh, no big deal. It doesn't take away from the joy that I just had of doing all the things. Things finished, even though teacher says, try not to worry so much about getting my things finished, even though teacher says to do it. Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, Mary. Right? So I love you all. Habit change, right? Schedule, protocol daily. I encourage all of you to do the worksheets. You got this, and I will see you later.